So if this is your first webinar, fantastic. You're really, really welcome. If you've been to every webinar so far, brilliant. We're really pleased that you're still enjoying them. So I'm going to look in the chat and I'm going to see kind of where people are from. It's going really fast. I think I've forgotten, you know, like when you go to school and then over the summer you kind of forget to read and you can't really write. And, you know, I think tonight's going to be one of those. So if things are a little bit not as slick tonight, please, you know, be nice, because we have had a break. It's been fantastic, but we may forget how to do things.
Fabulous to see everybody, and I think probably there's lots of people who are returners, but we're hoping there's also some people who are new to our webinars, and you'll see there that the butterfly image is all made up of the word welcome. We're going to return to the butterfly almost at the end of the session tonight, but everybody is very welcome. And if you are a new student, so tonight we really did want lots of new students to come along to the session, and if you're a new student, the welcome is that you are very welcome to the profession. We also want to welcome our special guest, Hassan, who's been mentioned, who comes from Sierra Leone, and is going to talk to you later a little bit about social work in Sierra Leone when we consider international aspects of social work. As Kelly said, I love the way she said that. We might have forgotten how to do things. It might be a bit rusty, so do bear with us. We're hoping it'll be okay, but it feels a bit like it's number one all over again, if I'm honest. But we want to start off with looking at our story. So if you don't really know much about Social Work Student Connect, then this is how it started. So when the first national lockdown in the UK hit, I watched really concerned when I saw students posting on social media about their placements being suspended and how isolated they felt in their learning. And I was really questioning myself, as someone who's been a social worker for 32 years now, what can I do about this? And so I reached out on Twitter to ask if any students would be interested in helping me set up a few webinars to help keep students connected together. And what I expected to do was do maybe 3 or 4 webinars over a month or 6 weeks or so. And then here we are 18 months later on our 53rd webinar. You know, I wouldn't have believed that at all. 8 students started with the team. Over time, a few team members have moved on and new members have joined. And we're currently a team of 8 people. There's me, there's 3 newly qualified workers, and there's 4 students. But we've also got an alumni group who are the people who did work with us, who've moved on, but we still keep in contact with. So there are 8 of us. You will meet other team members later in the session. They're going to introduce themselves and bring something from themselves to the webinar. But just to say that we are going to be recruiting again very soon. We've held off. We didn't want to recruit before the session started because we wanted to focus on first year students. So if there's any of you listening in who are first year students who think, you know, I might want to get involved in this, then come for the next few weeks, let us know, see the kind of work that we do, and we will be recruiting again soon for team members. So our webinars attract up to 1,000 people, normally around 300 or 400 attend, and we have an international community. We've done 52 webinars so far, and this is our 53rd, and we've had more than 100,000 watchbacks of our sessions on YouTube. So they've gone down incredibly well. They're very popular as our weekly sessions. So some of the things that I'm going to go through with you tonight, if you've attended the sessions before, or even if you've watched some of my YouTube videos, might be familiar to you, but I still wanted to revisit some of these things because it gives us a structure to the whole session tonight. So for me, as a social worker, and I've been a social worker now for 32 years. When I qualified, it was a 4-year course. So 36 years since I started my social work journey. And I think probably towards the end of my first year, I started to use this as a framework for myself in my social work. And it's a problem-solving framework. It's very simple, but sometimes the most simple models can be the most powerful. So I look at the what, the why, and the how of any situation. If I'm working with a family, for example, I would be wanting to look at what's happening for this person and their family. Why has this situation come about? How can I work with them to bring about improved outcomes? So I use that as a framework all of the time. I know that there's some research from David Wilkins on child protection supervision in social work, in child protection social work. And that research says that a social worker should come out of supervision feeling like, in relation to each family they're working with, that they know what they're going to do in the next few home visits, why they're going to do that, and how they're going to do that. So this what, why, how is actually a really good framework for everything in social work. So I use it a lot. We're going to use it to structure tonight. But before we use it to structure tonight, I just want to say one of the things that I think has happened a lot, and I can't say exactly when I think this started to happen, but what I've noticed is that people don't ask why so much anymore in social work. I'm a practice educator and I really enjoy working with students on placement. And I've noticed that, you know, students, when they ask me, why do you do it like that, Siobhan? I find it really helpful because it makes me think, why do I do it like that? It keeps my practice fresh, if you like. But what I've noticed is, I can't be exact when this started to happen, but I'd say maybe, I don't know, the last 7 years or so, students less often ask me why. And they're more often asking me things like, what form do I need to fill in? How do I do this? What do I need to do next? And I get a lot of what and how questions and not so many why questions. So if you are a first year student, one of my first things that I want to say to you is always ask why. If you're thinking about why, just, you know, anything that you're asked, always think about why. Why is the most powerful question that you can ask. If you think about child development theory, all children go through a stage of asking why in relation to everything, so that they, you know, whatever you say to them, they'll still ask why, until eventually you kind of feel like, I haven't got any more answers. I don't know why. That why is actually all children hit that at a different age. And it's because that's when we're growing and developing, but it's the key element that helps us to connect to wider things. So the why question is the connector. The why question is professional curiosity. Asking why is essential. So my first plea is never think why is a silly question. There is no such thing as a silly question. Ask why. It's a really helpful question. It will help you to learn. But because this is such an important framework and we're welcoming people to social work tonight, although I know many of you who are here have been social workers for years, or maybe are new social workers, newly qualified, everybody is welcome, but we're going to be revisiting some of the basics for those of you who are brand new to social work training. So we're going to look at, well, what is social work? Why are we social workers? And how do we do it? We're going to look at the what, the why, and the how in tonight's session. So if I were to start off by just asking you, how do you describe what you do as a social worker? Or if you're a social work student, how do you describe what you're studying? People don't really understand social work, I think. You might hear, there's an academic phrase that you might hear on your training, that social work is a contested profession. What that basically means is that, you know, nobody really agrees on what it means. It means different things to different people. So there's, you know, it's contested what it is. Even just the basics of what social work is contested. So we've got to be very clear on what we do. And, you know, that's important for you to have a sense of your professional identity as a social worker. It's important for you to be able to share with colleagues what it is that we do as social workers, because everybody misunderstands what it is that we do. It's about being important with service users. You know, what does it mean to be a social worker knocking on somebody's door? It's important for your core. So, you know, to manage the stress, to build your resilience as a social worker, being clear on what we do. And it's also important in terms of multi-professional working. So I suppose I just want to start off tonight by exploring, well, what do we actually mean by social work? There's a couple of things that I want every social worker and every social work student, there's a couple of sentences that I want everybody to be able to complete. So tonight I'm going to tell you what those two sentences are, but I'm going to give you the starter, and you're going to need to think about how you complete it, because everybody will complete it differently. So if I said to you, social work is ... how would you complete that sentence? Now, over many years of teaching and training in social work, I've given that task to so many people. I've given it out in flip charts to people on training courses and things. And you can almost tell how someone completes that by how long ago they trained, by what kind of day they're having, by how they feel at the moment, by what their mood is. You can literally tell it changes constantly how we would complete that sentence. And we need to have a really clear way of explaining what it is that we do. So I have different ways of explaining what I do to different people, because sometimes for different audiences, you need to explain things differently. I'm going to speak now to those of you who are just in England, okay? Because I know you're from all over. The team is, you know, we've got Becky's from Wales and Dave's from Scotland. We'd love to have someone from Northern Ireland join the team. So when we're recruiting, just to be thinking about that. But you know, we've got students and newly qualified workers from all over the UK in the team, and from all over the world that join us in the sessions. But I just want you to think about just the English government for a moment, okay? It may not be fun to think about the English government, but I want you to think about how might the English government define what social work is. So how would the English government complete that sentence? Social work is ... And a few years ago, 10 years ago, then the social work government, the English government did complete that sentence, social work is ... in the Health and Social Care Bill, which became the Health and Social Care Act. But when it was a bill, it went for quite a long time. It had a lot of readings in our Parliament, this bill. But this is how the government, the English government, was going to complete that sentence. You won't believe it when the slide comes up, but this is how a government, a national government, was going to complete the sentence, social work is. Social work is what social workers do. I mean, literally, you know, I've got the little person that was standing up, falling over, just like, what on earth is going on here? That's how. So how do we actually describe what we do? We've got to get beyond social work is what social workers do. I'm going to give you two definitions that I like a lot. There are lots of definitions, but I'm going to give you two. This one is taken from Ruth Allen, the chief exec of BASWA, and it's one of my favourite definitions of social work. So Ruth Allen, in the Professional Social Work magazine that you get monthly if you're a member of BASWA, she said this. She said, social work is about life. It's treasuring humanity. It's building connections. It's sharing. And it's promoting fairness. It's all about creativity, care and love. It's about being there to help people overcome obstacles and oppressions that hold them back. For people using our services, a social worker should be someone to trust and believe in. Someone who helps you to believe in yourself. Sometimes we must hold boundaries, protect rights, advocate and challenge. But we're always in the midst of the messy stuff, finding ways forward. And social workers are always in the midst of the messy stuff. And I think in the middle of a global pandemic, it's never messier than it is right now. You know, it's very messy at the moment, but we're finding ways forward. The second definition that I'm going to share with you, if you are new to social work, if you're one of those new social work students joining us tonight, you'll see this definition a lot. This is the international definition of social work. You'll look at this so many times during your training. And this says, social work is a practice-based profession and an academic discipline. It promotes social change and development, social cohesion, and the empowerment and liberation of people. Principles of social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversities are central to social work. Underpinned by theories of social work, by social sciences, by humanities and Indigenous knowledge, social work engages people and structures to address life challenges and enhance well-being. Now, there's a lot in there. You're not going to knock on somebody's door and they say, what is it you do then? That's not going to roll off the tongue. It doesn't just come out it's a complex, layered definition of what we do as social workers, but it's a really important definition of what we do. And we love, as Social Work Student Connect and the team, we love having people from all over the world join us in our webinar sessions. And we get the opportunity to meet with social workers all over the world. We're meeting with some social workers from Korea quite soon, for example, to talk about the work that we do. So meeting with social workers from different countries can really help us to think about what social work is. And we were really fortunate that Hassan Koroma got involved with our virtual graduation, and we really enjoyed working together. And so as a result of Hassan's involvement in our virtual graduation, which was our webinar number 50, we want to further some of the connections between our community and between social work students and social workers in Sierra Leone and in our community. What we're going to try to do is start up some kind of like a pen pal system. It probably won't be traditional post, it'll be some kind of email or WhatsApp connection. But we're going to ask people, if you're interested in connecting with a social worker in Sierra Leone or a student in Sierra Leone or in another country, then let us know and we'll try to connect you. And I'm going to ask Hassan now if he'll come off mute and if he will come and tell us a little bit about social work in Sierra Leone. It looks like you've had another power cut actually, Hassan. I don't know if that's actually just at the point I'm introducing you. It looks like the power's gone. But if you could unmute yourself and just tell us a little bit about social work in Sierra Leone, that would be great. There we go.
That's fine?
Yeah.
Okay. Greetings, everyone from Sierra Leone. I'm Hassan Koroma. I'm the founder and national coordinator for social work in Sierra Leone. I really want to thank Professor, I'm not good at names because I deal with so many people. So it has to take time for me to, to try to familiarize with names here. But just with this opportunity for me to share about social work in Sierra Leone, it's a very, very new profession in our country, and it has been in practice for over years. But the social work education is absolutely a new profession in our country, and it started with 2-year course, and in 2002, and which I was fortunate to went through. And after my 2-year study, at that time, the perception around social work in Sierra Leone was really not encouraging. Not many people want to associate themselves as social workers. And it's also being considered as an academia for dropouts, people who were not able to go for the law professions or the medical profession or the engineers. So social working at that time was really considered as a weak professional discipline. So that kind of perception was really inspired by me at that time to establish this organization as a movement to mobilize social workers to stand up for our profession and to see how best we can contribute meaningfully so that we can be gaining national attention to be able to recognize as a profession. So we established in 2012 at that time. It was really challenging, first of all, to be influencing colleagues, social workers to work together. So I was kind of engaging different set of people who have the sense of understanding how social workers can make a difference in terms of social development and helping people, especially with the real life challenges as a country who has gone through war, who's dealing with disasters and poverty. So these are all things that I was being able to engage, individuals with academic mind to join me and have social work as an organization. So that is how first we started as a movement. And as we keep moving, we started able to have others who started seeing the beauty of social work based on our contribution, especially when we started having the outbreak of the Ebola. When we we're among the frontliners in terms of providing education and prevention for people, you know, to prevent themselves from the Ebola outbreak. And so people started recognizing the significance of social workers because we were able to break the cultural barriers in terms of communicating with people, understanding the dynamics around, you know, communication, and in terms of in connection with the disease. So people start to recognize behavioral change based on our involvement at that time. So governments, you know, at that under the Ministry of Social Welfare, started partnering with us, you know, trying to use social workers in terms of public health education. So that is the first limelight we gain as an organization, you know, with our contribution during the Ebola outbreak. And as we move forward, there are several social, you know, hills that we are facing with as a country that we also be part of as dealing with the Ebola outbreak. At the post-recovery period, we see so many difficulties with survivors, with Ebola orphans, how so many, in terms of their needs, in terms of their developments, we see all of this as we are not being addressed by government. So the whole lot of psychological stress, a whole lot of feeling of not being cared for by government was also presented, you know, during the post-recovery period. So, you know, we see that kind of situation as our own issue to intervene. So we started doing so many programs with Ebola orphans and at the same time with Ebola survivors. So that is how we started gaining, you know, recognition at national level to start selling the social work profession. So as we speak right now, we have an educational program, which is just a bachelor level. We don't have master's program. So in terms of education, there are a little bit progress, but there's still more need to be done because we have a very challenge when it comes to high profile social workers, because for somebody to have beyond the bachelor's, except you study outside Sierra Leone, at the moment we only have the bachelor's, which is the highest program for social work in Sierra Leone. So we are really kind of so much eager to have a kind of international partnership and networking with high-profile social workers across the globe who are willing to contribute to knowledge base, you know, in diverse ways, because social work is the fastest growing profession in Sierra Leone. You know, we have so many students who are enrolling for social work programs, but we are really limited in terms of how do we broaden knowledge, how do we use, how do we really compete with international, you know, level when it comes to social work education. So at the moment, that is what the profession is really starving. But when it comes to practitioners, we are so much lucky, especially working with social workers. Our membership base is currently we just have intern students who are 24 that came in to did their internship in our organization. So you can imagine just 25 for this year, and each year the number keep increasing. And if we add up 25 to our current database, we have a total of 272, you know, who will be part of our social workers organization. So we still building the profession, but we still having challenges in terms of how do we match up with global standard around, you know, around the globe, so that we can be able to present ourselves as social workers everywhere. So if I am having an opportunity to talk about social work in Sierra Leone, it's basically we are also having a social work program here. We're having a massive numbers of social workers, but at the same time, when it comes to the academia, we're really having a challenge because it's a new, you know, it's the academia aspect is new, whilst the practice has been ongoing. So partnership and collaboration is one way we can be able to uplift or advance the social work profession in Sierra Leone. And that is more what I've been following on Facebook, on social media. That's how I came in contact with Social Work Connect, and I established, relationship with Professor, and I expressed our interest that we would love to be partner. We love to have a partnership with your community, and in order for us to be able to work together and promote social work in our country. So basically, that is all I would love to share.
Thank you, Hassan. What I'd also say, though, Hassan, is don't think about necessarily about how you bring yourself up to the standards internationally. I think we have a lot to learn from you. I think we have a lot to learn from one another in all over the world. And I think the way that social workers in your country have really promoted, look at that, the light came just on again, so you had the power cut because your power's been going on and off, hasn't it, tonight? But I think the way that social workers in your country responded to the Ebola crisis actually gave social workers all over the world some knowledge around how to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I think actually, in your country, social work is fascinating, and some of the things that you have been doing is just really interesting. And I think that students and social workers in the UK will learn a lot from connecting with your organisation. So thank you for sharing with us tonight, and hopefully we'll continue to link together moving forwards. Thank you for sharing that, Hassan. And I know people will be interested in talking to you in the chat as well. So thank you very much. So if we move to looking at, we've explored what social work is. And as Hassan told us, social work is a very new profession in Sierra Leone, but we have a lot to learn, I think, from other countries, and all of us together. So I want every student to be able to answer the question, well, what is social work? To complete that sentence, social work is ... But I also want every social worker or every student to be able to answer, I want to be a social worker because ... or I am a social worker because ... That's the second sentence you need to be able to complete within this profession. And the reason for that is to avoid the cynical spiral of practice that you can get sucked into so easily. Sometimes people are so negative about social work, you get really sucked down. I think the what, why, how framework helps you, because what social work means to me and why I do it has never changed in the 36 years since I started social work training. That's never changed. How I do it's changed loads of times, but what social work means to me and why I am a social worker has never changed. That provides your core, and it stops us getting sucked into a cynical spiral. Having a core as a social worker, Louise Grant and Gail Kinman, who do a lot of work on resilience in social work, they say a strong core helps to create social workers who can fly in their practice. And that being able to fly in practice is really important. So we're going to, each team member is very quickly going to share with you their joy, their top joy from being a social worker, and also their top tip for you as new social workers, so that we can make sure that we're not being cynical. You're going to hear so much negativity about social work, and actually social work brings such a lot of joy. So we're going to start off with Chris.
Thank you. So as you can see, my biggest joy in social work is actually just seeing the difference that the efforts that I bring make to the lives of those that I'm working with and to their families. I'm in my newly qualified year, and I've had loads of really positive feedback, which just makes me appreciate that, people are benefiting from the time that I'm investing in them and from the work that I'm doing with them. So that's good.
And your top tip, Chris?
My top tip, be kind and generous with your time. It might feel like you don't have a lot of time, and in reality, you might not have a lot of time, but actually giving people your time and really listening to them and really understanding them makes all the difference. And by doing that, when you work with somebody for a long period, you will reap the rewards of it, because it's like building the foundations of a house. If you don't have good foundations, then the work you're doing and the relationships you're building are going to be rocky. So invest early on is my top tip.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Chris. And then we're going to go to Koroma for your biggest joy and your top tip.
So my biggest joy as a social work student is to feel heard by my educational institution, because by voicing from my experiences things that haven't worked or the things that have worked really well has allowed me to sort of make impact on the learning of the future cohorts as well, because if something hasn't worked, the university's taken that on board and have said, well, actually, do you know what, if it hasn't worked, we'll try doing this instead if you feel this is going to work better. And that has been implemented from when we were first years, and I'm now a third year. So, you know, for the last 2 years, to see the recommendations that we've made or advice that we've given to the university and said, why don't you try doing this instead to try and make the lives of other students a bit more easier, has been really good, because I know it's, as a student, sometimes you feel like you're not valued because you're just seen as being just a student, but that wasn't the case for me, and for me that was my biggest joy. So my top tip, what I would say, is to never be afraid to think outside the box or to try something new. Because that was me before I started university. I didn't want to try anything new. I went to university to just get my degree. But since then, I've tried so many different things, and it's helped me to gain more perspectives on different things, make connections and meet new people as well.
Fab. Thanks, Koroma. And then Kat, your biggest joy and your top tip?
It looks like it's very much similar to Chris's. I think for me, it's making an actual difference for the families that I'm working with, and seeing that change throughout this year in my newly qualified role, and changing people's perceptions as well of social workers. You know, I work with a lot of families who are very resistant initially, so it's good to be able to see that.
And your top tip?
Top tip would be to ask those questions and not be afraid. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have put my hand up before, but it's definitely something that I've realised we need to do now. Imposter syndrome, as we know, affects us all, and we need to understand that we're constantly learning. So make time for those questions.
Fab. Thank you, Kat. And then we're over to Di for your biggest joy and your top tip.
So my biggest joy is coming from being a student, because not quite a social worker yet, and it's sort of there's so like many possibilities that have been opened up to me, and opportunities, possibilities, and I've met some amazing people along the way, and I'm sure I shall meet many more people as I go along in my journey. And for me, a top tip is about self-care. I would say if you're coming into the profession, you're coming in as a student, get your self-care sorted from the outset, because it is really, really important to find that balance between your work life, you know, your work and your home life, to get that balance right, but get it right from the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree there, Di. You've got to do it right from the outset. Thank you for that. And then Kelly, your biggest joy and your top tip? In fact, yours says biggest joy.
Yeah, my biggest joy is also I'm not quite a social. Sorry?
It says your biggest tip. I've realised it says biggest tip, not top tip, but you can have a top joy and a biggest tip.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, so biggest joy so far in social work, as I'm not quite a social worker yet, I'm a student, is when we very first started in our first year, we set up a society, and got involved in lots of things I never thought I would get involved in. And the biggest one was we had a collection of Christmas presents. We worked with Bradford Council, who were absolutely amazing. And we delivered Christmas presents to people who were in receipt of social work services, who had the only people they had in their lives were people who were paid to be there. So we went out as students and delivered these gifts to people. And it was absolutely fantastic to see kind of like that was social work. We went out with social workers and completely changed my perception of what social workers did and what social workers could do. So that was like a brilliant start to my social work training. And my kind of top tip, or biggest tip if you like, would be that don't stop learning, don't ever stop learning. And when you think you know enough, you really don't. And when you think you know everything, you really don't. You know, you've always got something to learn, whether that's from you know, theories to approaches to social work. You know, you can learn something every day from the people that you work with and you work for and you work alongside. You know, you've always got something to learn, so just don't stop.
Fabulous, thank you, Kelly. And then we've got Becky's biggest joy and top tip. Becky.
Yeah, okay, so I'm newly qualified and I've only been in my role for a couple of months, but my biggest joy is still building that trust. And when you get to that point where you've got an understanding that the family that you're working with trust me and believe me when I say that, you know, I do really want to help them. And it can be really difficult relationship building, I think, but it shouldn't be underestimated, because when you do build that relationship, it can be a huge joy. So yeah, that's my biggest joy. My top tip, I think because I did my entire final year, my placement and my entire final year was basically virtual. I didn't get to go out very much. We were in the thick of the lockdown. But as things creep slowly back to normal, I'm going out more and I'm meeting families, but still wearing a mask. So you can still only see, you know, half of my face. So I've learned that it's really important. I don't take my laptop with me anyway. I wouldn't dream of getting my laptop out when I'm visiting a family and typing away. But I do make sure that actually the first thing I do is not to get my pen and paper out. I just sit down and I really listen. Because most of the time I've been fortunate that I do remember the conversations that I've had as long as I go away, and I write them up just shorthand in my pad, you know, shortly afterwards. But I just think it's really important to really be present and listen. And if a child or a family can only see that much of your face, it's really nice to have eye contact, or at least show that you're looking and you're trying to express something with your eyes and your ears. So yeah, just put the pen and paper down and don't hide behind a laptop. Like, actually be present when you meet your family. So that was me.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you for that, Becky. And then Dave, what's your biggest joy and your top tip? Is Dave there still?
Yeah. I forgot to unmute myself. So my biggest joy, which is real, I tried to reflect on this because I get dead excited about our course and then I get ranty and ragey, but my biggest joy so far has been watching the joy from my tutors and my lecturers. And when they tell you stories, and you know that way when a lecturer is telling you about your coursework and then they go on a complete tangent and tell you about something from the 1920s when they were still a junior social worker. And I love that. I love that. And it's they always make it relevant. They always link it, and you're like, there was no way you should have linked that. But it's incredible passion that you see from people that have been academics for 20 years, been out the field, but their stuff is still so passionate. They've still got that social work fire. So that's been my biggest joy so far. And then obviously being part of the team, because I'm a suck up. And my tip is to make friends and relationships everywhere you go. You can never have too many contact sources of support or advice. And like I've been saying in the chat to Emma and the guys, it's a great course, but it can be hard at times. And just having friends around is really important, because otherwise you might find yourself just having that one question and all it needed was to bounce it off someone for your memory to re-jog itself. So, and plus having friends is always good. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Thanks, Dave. So that's, you've heard from the team. We want to have new members of the team, as we said earlier. Later on tonight, although we can't see and hear you as audience members, we are going to ask you if you want to put your cameras on at the end. Well, we will put your cameras on for you if you put your hands up, so that we get to see some of you and we get to start to connect together. My biggest joy, I was really struggling with what would I pick out, and probably on a different day I'd pick out different things. And when Dave just said, you know, when there used to be a social worker in the 1920s, made me feel really old. I was thinking, is that what this is going to be? But this is from actually when I was very newly qualified as a social worker. And my biggest joy, I think, was helping a man who'd lived, he had a learning disability, and he'd lived in a long stay, one of the old Victorian asylum services for more than 50 years, really, I think. And I moved him into back to his home area to live independently with some support to start off with, but after a short while he just lived completely independently, and saw him become a really key member of his local community. And the joy of that, I think, was amazing for me and stays with me, and I can still visualize his face and the joy on his face when he got his own home to live in. And just also working with social workers from all over the world and learning about social work in different countries has also been a great joy for me. And in terms of top tips, I've got too many for just one, so I'm going to give you a few. So the second part of the webinar is going to be a few of my top tips, but it won't be all of them. My first top tip, if you are new to social work, or even if you're not new to social work, even if you're just changing over job roles in social work or anything, is to start reflective journaling even now. Just start writing something down. At the end of every week, look back at the week and just jot down a few notes. And I think my top tip for that, particularly if you're very new, is just to use these 4 words. At the end of every week, think about the surprises you've had that week and just jot down a few things about what surprised you this week, what satisfied you this week, what's dissatisfied you this week, and what's your learning been this week. So 4 words: surprises, satisfactions, dissatisfactions, learning. And it's, you know, they're there as road signs because actually they help direct your journey. Because I'll tell you something, if you've just joined social work, if your course is just starting, you will be surprised by so many things right now. But in a few weeks' time, you won't be surprised by quite as much. And you'll get to the point where you've forgotten what you were surprised by in the first place. And you'll get to the point where nothing surprises you. I mean, literally. So just understanding that and seeing that growth and progress is really helpful. So start reflective journaling even now. Connect. We are called Social Work Student Connect, even though most of us are now not students, but we're called the Connect team because connecting is so important. As Dave said, just you can't have too many connections. Connect with one another. This is a great community to connect with. I love reading the chat after the sessions. I can't look at it while I'm doing the sessions because I get too sidetracked, but I love reading the chat later. And, you know, if there's a social work society at your university, join it. If there isn't, then start one. Talk to Kelly and Kultuma about how they did that, because they started a social work society with their colleagues at their university, and it was brilliant. You know, use Twitter. I mean, there's lots of other social media, and probably some of the team will tell you other social media is great. I only use Twitter, but I think it's great. It's a really good social media platform for professional purposes, and you can connect together with people. Connect theory with your practice, connect your reflections, connect your learning. Our webinars will help you to do that. Our webinars help you to do connect. That's the whole point of it being a connect team. So, you know, look for connections. But then a key element is that if you're new to the profession, you're joining it in the middle of a global pandemic, and that's going to bring challenges as well as significant opportunities. It may not feel like there's going to be lots of opportunity, but there will be. You know, the pandemic is challenging, but also has opportunities. And just in the same way that learning about social work in other countries is helpful, just thinking about international social work guidance is really useful. So look at the IFSW website. It's all free. I think that probably team members are going to pop into the chat now some of the links to some of these documents. But this particular document I've talked about a couple of times in our webinars, but it's a really helpful document. From the International Federation of Social Workers, this looks at what it's meant to be working in the midst of a global pandemic. And it says this in the introduction, written by Sarah Banks. It says, social workers have been working tirelessly during this COVID-19 pandemic, not just to deliver much needed social services, but also to do this as respectfully, compassionately, and fairly as possible. Practicing during pandemic and crisis conditions is extremely challenging, unsettling old priorities and requiring a reassessment of what might be ethically right in new circumstances. At times when social workers are at their most stressed and isolated, and when fast responses are expected, the importance of slow, careful, ethical deliberation is never greater. This guide draws on social workers' accounts of their real-life ethical challenges and responses to offer some pointers for social workers to consider. We hope that social workers will find the time to read it, to reflect on the issues raised, and to contribute new ideas and recommendations as circumstances and practices evolve. Now, if you are a new student, there's going to be loads of things on your reading list, loads of things you're recommended to read. But this document is free, downloadable, easy to read, because it's not necessarily written for people whose first language is English. So it's a very understandable document, but a great document. It will class as what's called a primary resource on your reading list. So it'll be really useful for you to add into assignments, for example. But in this document, it talks us through the key challenges that face social workers in the pandemic all over the world. And this is what it says. It says people without access to technology or the skills to use it, or people who lose contact, could be unable to access services. There are threats to our privacy from home-based ICT systems which might not be reliable or secure. We could have difficulties in ensuring privacy and confidentiality because conversations that we're having might be overheard by other members of the households of either service users or social workers. We could have difficulties in making fair assessments of service users' needs and living conditions without being able to move freely through a house or see and sense people's non-verbal gestures. We could have difficulties in creating empathy and building trusting relationships, especially with people who are accessing services for the first time. There might be problems in maintaining the boundaries between our personal and professional life. And if face-to-face meetings do occur, as Becky was telling us earlier, the use of face masks and physical distancing and other PPE could be off-putting or even frightening for service users at particularly stressful times in their lives. And this document goes on to explain how social workers have been handling this. It's a really good read. It's a starting basis for thinking about ethics, particularly in the midst of a global pandemic. We've talked about that one a few times, but this one is brand new. This one came out at the end of August. It's not even a month old. It's a really excellent resource. It's got the same image on the front, as you'll see, but the first one had like a green tinge. This one's got like an orange tinge, but it's the same image. This one is about pandemic ethics. It's a particular resource for social work students, practice educators, and practitioners. And it goes through a number of, it calls them vignettes. They're like little mini case studies from all over the world. And these are what it includes. So it talks about, in lots of different countries, lots of different scenarios, but things we've all struggled with. So enabling family contact with nursing home residents in Spain, hospital social workers breaking the rules to help family members in Nigeria, balancing human rights and disease control in domestic violence shelter in Hong Kong, handling suicidal calls without support in Puerto Rico, deciding whether to place children in foster care in an emergency in Italy, preparing to discharge an older man from hospital in Brunei, deciding whether to challenge racism in the UK, deciding not to do a home visit in Slovenia, deciding whether to purchase and deliver essential items to families in need in the USA. They are fascinating. If you want to read real life scenarios that social workers all over the world are dealing with, this is the best place to read them. It's really useful, very quick, very easy to understand. And it then goes through and provides some really useful academic material for you, but also good practice-based frameworks for those of you who are qualified or who are on placement. So it suggests a threefold framework for looking at ethical dilemmas in social work. It talks about being ethically vigilant, so being alert to ethical dilemmas and difficult dimensions to our practice. It talks about ethical reasoning, so thinking things through and how to balance rights and responsibilities and risks, weighing up harms and benefits, judging the right approach or the right course of action, and being able to defend your decision making. And then it talks about ethical logistics. So how do we work with ethics strategically and practically to build on our ethical judgments and decisions? It's a really good document, really useful, I think, for everybody, whether you have just started your social work training this week or whether you've been a social worker like I have for 32 years, this document is really interesting. So to try and bring us all together, and we've got so many different people at so many different stages of your social work career, we thought, okay, we'll give you one of those vignettes. So this is one of the short vignettes, one of the short examples, and it's about hospital social workers breaking the rules to help family members in Nigeria. So during COVID-19 restrictions, there were no cash withdrawal facilities available from banks. You couldn't go with, a cash physically into a bank and take cash out. You could only use a hole in the wall system. Family members of hospital patients were therefore unable to get the money that was required to pay for hospital care. So hospital social workers recognising this and seeing that actually, patients could lose their beds, it could be a whole major problem. What they did was they supported families, decided to assist families by enabling them to transfer money into the social workers' personal bank accounts. And then the social workers were able to use cash machines to withdraw the money. According to hospital rules, that wasn't allowed. Now, this is in Nigeria. So I'm asking you the question here. Was this decision, and there's a poll coming up that I want you to vote on. So Chris should be putting the poll up for people now. I'm looking at Chris. It looks like she's pressing the button. I can't see it. I don't know if other people can see it. There we go. It's come up. So I'm asking you, having told you about what social workers decided to do in Nigeria, do you think that that was an ethical decision? Do you think it was unethical? Do you think it depends on something? Or is your answer, I just don't know? I don't know. So you've got 4 options to answer. And look, we've got about a quarter of you have answered so far. So I'm going to ask you just keep on answering and let's see what the change looks like. I don't know if you can see it going up and down on your screen in front of you, but I can see it's almost like a bit of a race. Everything's moving all at the same time. And we started off with people almost seeming to be very clear on the approach and your answer. And then it's wavered a little bit, and now it's coming out at, it's almost even really. And I wonder if people have pressed one button and then thinking, oh, I want to change my mind now that I've seen things. Now I'm thinking about it more, almost want to change my mind. But okay, we're at 63%, 64%, 65% of you have voted. I know not everyone is able to vote, so it depends what device you're watching it on. So, but what we've got so far is that 29% of you think this was an ethical decision. 26% of you think it was an unethical decision. 33% of you think it depends on something. And I'm assuming that you're putting in the chat what you think it depends on. And 12% of you just don't know. And it's around about that. It's actually changing a bit more now, 30% ethical, 26% unethical. So interesting, isn't it, that actually we might view things differently in different contexts. And what it's important to recognise is, and just to say to you, if you do work in the UK, this is absolutely not ethical in the UK because of the context in which we operate, okay? But when we operate in different contexts, then maybe what's ethical is different in different contexts, different climates. So it's important for us, I think, to really start to think about and connect with some of these issues. And that document is a really interesting read and takes us through some of those really quite challenging, difficult scenarios. So if we just, I'm trying to move my slides on. There we go. Just to say that if you think, I just don't know, or even if you think one answer, but then actually you think about it a bit more and you change your mind a bit more, I don't know, if there's a bit of uncertainty in responding to that, that actually social work is often about living with uncertainty. I think Kelly said earlier in her top tip, something like, if you think you know everything, you definitely don't. And that's absolutely the case. The more experienced I've become as a worker over years, the more uncertain I am about lots of things, actually. And Dewey, who is one of the first people to write about professional thought processes right back in the sort of 1950s and 60s, he wrote that genuine ignorance is profitable, because it's likely to be accompanied by humility, curiosity, and open-mindedness. One of the things I most want to see in social work students is professional humility and professional curiosity. That really matters. And Einstein is attributed with saying, the more I learn, the more I realise I don't know. And that's it really, is, you know, social work is uncertain. In the reflective practice cards, which I know quite a few of you have, there is a specific card about uncertainty, why it's important in social work and how we can best manage it. If you are new to social work, if you've just started a course this week, there'll be lots of times along the way that you feel uncertain, but that's good. That's how we should feel. We should have professional humility, professional curiosity. You are very likely to experience lots of change during your social work training and onwards into your social work career. You know, social work is all about change. You know, when we had that, how would you complete this sentence? Social work is, well, one of the ways to complete the sentence is it's the profession of change. We exist to support people in creating change in their lives. And you will change a great deal along your journey to becoming a social worker, or even once you qualify as a social worker. And that's a good thing. I want to get you to think about, if you're a newly qualified worker, maybe think about yourself in this position. If you're brand new to social work training, but if you've been a social worker for a long time, think about those new social workers and how we describe them, either brand new students or brand new social workers. I saw this tweet not very long ago. I've really tried to anonymize it because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I saw this tweet where somebody put a photograph of themselves and put, "It's my first day teaching baby social workers, wish me luck." And loads of people did, and you can see it got loads of likes and stuff. And, you know, I did want to wish the person luck, but I felt much like the person who commented underneath, "Congratulations, but please don't call them baby social workers." I know it's just a turn of phrase. I'm sure that it is just a turn of phrase, but it can really negate the strengths of people's previous experiences. You are not a baby social worker. Whether you're newly qualified social worker or whether you're new to the course, you're not a baby social worker. Don't see yourself as a baby social worker. And if you're an experienced social worker, definitely don't refer to baby social workers. Or if you're a practice educator, you know, we're working with students who are adults who have so much life experience and so much often professional pre-course experience. You're not even a blank canvas or an empty vessel, which I sometimes hear people talking about. So what are you? What are you if you're new to the world of social work? If you're not a baby social worker and you're not a blank canvas or an empty vessel, what are you? I'm going to go back to the community of social work demonstrated as a zoo. Now, I'm not going to talk about the whole zoo. And if you want to know about the zoo, because it is really fun and fabulous, there is a video on YouTube that I think the team will put into the chat now if you wanted more on this. But this was a piece of group work done by a group of newly qualified social workers, where they described what their team felt like to them as social workers who were new. But they depicted themselves as a caterpillar, and they put on it through transformative learning. They were planning to turn into a butterfly because they knew that social work was all about how we grow and how we change. I'm not very good at science, but I do remember, and when my children were young, we used to have this little thing where we helped caterpillars become butterflies in like a little thing. It was lovely. It was really nice. We used to watch them and watch what was happening to them. And we know about the life cycle of butterflies. We know, that butterflies lay eggs, and then there's caterpillars, and then the caterpillar becomes a pupa or like a chrysalis, cocoon, and then that turns into a butterfly. And actually, I think in many ways, that's like the process of becoming a social worker. That social worker that can fly. Do you remember Louise Grant and Gail Kinman talked about social workers who can fly? That's almost what it's like, really, is that life cycle, that process of becoming a butterfly is much like the process that we go through to become social workers. But we don't go through it just once. We go through it so many times. I've been in that caterpillar stage so many times in my career. Every time you change jobs, every time the role changes, every time there's new legislation, we have to constantly change. We have to constantly keep up to date. So we're going to constantly go through that cycle. But I came across this lovely story, and Kelly said when I told her, she said, "Oh, it sounds like one of your stories, this." But I came across this lovely story about, I didn't know about this at all. It was a social worker that told me that if you try to help a butterfly out of the chrysalis, so let's say you can see a butterfly really struggling, if you try and open the chrysalis or the cocoon for it, it's very likely to kill the butterfly, because butterflies need the struggle of getting out of the cocoon, because that helps it to strengthen its wings. It's what actually gives it the wings. Otherwise, the wings can't fly. So if we try to help somebody too much, there's a good lesson for us in terms of what we do in terms of social work and how we help people with the struggles that they face. But you will face struggles along the way of becoming a social worker. You can connect with others. They will also be struggling, but nobody can help you out of that cocoon, because if they help you out of it, you won't be ready. So the struggles will help make you ready to be that social worker who can fly. The struggles of the pandemic will help all of us to become better social workers. So along the way, final 2 top tips that I have for you. The first one is this. As a student, you are going to be asked so many times, what are your learning needs? And it's such a difficult question to answer, because you don't know what you don't know. I've never worked there before. I don't know. I've never been a social worker before. I don't know. When we put the poll up earlier, people going, I just don't know. I don't know. So we don't know what we don't know. So I would suggest try a bring and buy. Now, it's not like, get everything you've got in your rucksack out and try and flog it to people. It's not that kind of bring and buy. It's think to yourself, when you're starting anything new, whether it's a new module or a new placement or a new job or a new role, what am I bringing to this? Because you all bring something. You're not a baby social worker or a blank canvas that brings nothing. You all bring something. What am I bringing to this? And what do I want to buy or get from this? And that will help you to value yourself and be a more proactive learner. So it's just an easier way of thinking about, what are your learning needs? What am I bringing? What do I want to buy? And I love the phrase that Hassan used earlier about, we've been selling social work to the government in Sierra Leone. It's like that. How do we promote what we do as social workers? It is about selling. It is about, what and whether people want to buy what you're selling or not as well is also really important. But think about what you bring and what you buy. And my final top tip, as I'm going to ask anybody who wants to put their camera on, or anybody who's got a question for the team, maybe even, then I'm quite happy for you to put your hands up, and we will, the team will put your cameras on, and you'll come in on mute, but we'll... I'm going to move that back. You'll come in on mute. But my final top tip is to join our community, to come to these sessions every week. Every week is different. We have a different topic every week. Next week, we'll be looking at theory as the food of social work. But you'll see on there the poster for all of the sessions that we've got coming up. Some of the sessions are facilitated by me and by the team. Other sessions are just the team, and other sessions we have guests come or panels of people who come. So my final tip, I suppose, is join us, join our community, connect around the world. You know, email us and tell us that you'd really like to get connected with a social worker in Sierra Leone, and you'd like to chat to them about the work they do and learn from them, and you'd like to help them learn from you. And learning together about social work with someone from the other side of the world is a really fabulous opportunity. So connect together. But if you want to put your cameras on now, I opened the Q&A and now I can't close it again. So I don't know what I've done, Chris, I'm sorry. Otherwise, I would be really trying to help anybody who had put their hands up and wanted to come on camera. But if you want to put your hands up, if you want to come on camera, if you want to ask a question, just pop your hand up, come along. We'd like to meet people. We like to see people at the end of the session. I think Chris and Kat will start moving people up now. If anybody has put the hand up, I think we've got about 11 people so far put the hands up, but feel free, the more the merrier to come on camera and join us. It just means your camera's on and so we can see you. And I can already see, look, I see Helen Shepherd coming up. Helen has attended, I think, every week since the beginning. I saw Helen come up, and there we go. Helen, you're going to be a guest at a future webinar as well, aren't you? So we're looking forward to seeing you there. And then I can see Heidi. I recognise Heidi's name. I can see June. So I can see lots of people coming up there, which is fabulous to see people. If people have a question, something that you'd like to ask, oh, there's Keela. I can see Keela. There's Ifya. I can see you. If you have a particular question that you want to ask, put it into the chat. So Emma is saying, how much does it cost to be part of Connect? It costs nothing to be part of our weekly community. You just come, you register for the sessions and you just come. So our sessions are free for everybody to attend. If you attend live, you are given a certificate of attendance.